In the dusty heart of the western frontier, where the sun scorched the land until the earth cracked, and the wind carried the whispers of old secrets, there stood a small town that seemed almost forgotten by time, a place where law was fragile, justice was slow, and survival belonged to the ones who could grip it with blooded hands. The saloon was the beating heart of this town, its swinging doors opening day and night to card players, drifters, cowhands, and sometimes the outlaws who walked in with a crooked grin and left only after trouble had kissed the floor. It was in that dim-lit saloon, with the air thick from tobacco smoke and the sharp scent of whiskey, that a moment unfolded which would change the fate of a young woman forever. Her name was Clara, a striking figure with chestnut hair that shimmered when the lantern light caught it. Though her beauty was both her blessing and her curse, she had come west with dreams of a better life, working as a seamstress and helping in the saloon when times grew lean. She was known for her kind heart and her quiet resilience, but in a town where men measured power in violence and dominance, a woman's strength was too often tested in cruel ways. That evening, when the crowd had grown restless and the piano man was hammering out tunes to keep spirits high, one man, rough around the edges and darker in soul, set his eyes on her. His name was Harlan Briggs, a ranch hand with a cruel reputation, known for the way he treated both cattle and people, like they were tools for his anger. He'd been drinking too much, the way he always did when payday came, and when he stumbled toward Clara, his grin was the kind that promised nothing but trouble. She tried to turn away, tried to slip past the tables, but Heron was quicker. He grabbed her by the wrist first. Then when she struggled, his fist tangled in her long hair, yanking her backward until her head smacked against the wooden wall behind the bar. The room went still for a moment, laughter dying on lips, the piano falling silent as the sound of her gasp cut through the haze. His knuckles twisted tighter in her hair, pulling her face upward, pinning her helplessly against the boards, and his breath reeked of liquor as he leaned close and hissed threats she didn't want to hear. Some men watched in silence, their courage drowned in the bottom of their glasses, while others looked away, not wanting to tangle with Harlan's mean streak. Clara's eyes watered, not just from pain, but from the humiliation of being trapped under his grip. And she prayed silently for someone to step forward, someone to stop him, someone to remind this town that cruelty could still be punished, that someone walked in just then, the doors swinging open with a creak that seemed almost fated. His name was Samuel Colt, or at least that's what people called him, though most just called him Sam, and he was a cowboy who carried himself with the calm certainty of a man who had seen violence wade it, and learned that it must be measured carefully like fire in the dry brush. His hat was pulled low, his coat dusted from the road, and his boots made a soft thud on the wooden floor as he entered. The room, still hushed from the cruel spectacle against the wall, seemed to breathe differently as Sam stepped in, his eyes narrowing when they landed on Clara's predicament. He didn't rush. That was his way. He simply walked with purpose, every step deliberate until he stood just close enough for Harlan to notice him. Harlan sneered, not loosening his grip, and spat something about minding one's own business. But Sam didn't flinch. Didn't look away, didn't even blink. His voice was low when he finally spoke, but the weight of it dropped like iron into the silence. "Let her go," he said, and though the words were simple, they cut sharper than any blade. Heron laughed, yanking Clara's hair tighter, making her WC in pain, and shouted something about how no drifter was going to tell him what to do. That's when Sam moved, swift as lightning, but controlled as a coiled rattler striking. His hand shot forward, gripping Harlan's wrist with such strength that the drunkard's fingers unclenched in shock, and in the same breath, Sam's fist came around with a force that carried not just muscle but conviction, The crack of bone echoed, Harlan's jaw snapping sideways under the blow, blood spraying as his body collapsed to the floorboards. Clara stumbled forward, free at last, her breath ragged, and Sam caught her before she could fall, steadying her with a gentleness that contrasted the violence of the moment. The saloon erupted, then some gasped, some cheered quietly. Others whispered about what would come next, because in the West, no act of defiance went unanswered. Sam looked down at Harlan, writhing and clutching his broken jaw, and then back at Clara, his voice softer this time, meant only for her. "You're safe now," he said, and those words, though brief, wrapped around her heart like a shield. But safety was never simple in a place like this. Outside, the world was already shifting, rumors sparking like wildfire, for Harlan had friends, men just as mean and twice as reckless. And a fight like this was only the beginning. Yet in that moment, with Clara trembling against his chest in the room, buzzing with the shock of what had just unfolded, the cowboy knew he had made his choice. He would not stand by and let cruelty rule unchecked, no matter the cost. And Clara, though shaken, felt for the first time in years that maybe, just maybe, fate had sent someone who would not just fight for her, but remind her that she was worth fighting for. That night marked the first step in a storm neither of them could yet see. A storm that would test courage, loyalty, and the fragile hope that had just been born in the shadow of violence. The night after the fight carried a heavy silence, though everyone in town knew the quiet was only the calm before the storm, for Harlan Briggs was not the kind of man to accept humiliation without it. Revenge and the broken jaw Sam had given him would soon be spoken of in every saloon and ranch house within 20 m. Clara sat by the window of her small room above the general store, staring at the dusty road below, her hair brushed loose to hide the sore spot where it had been yanked so cry, her heart still racing every time she remembered the way she had been pinned to the wall, helpless, until Sam had appeared like some figure out of a story. She should have felt safe, but instead she felt the weight of danger pressing in from every direction. Because a man like Harlan had friends, men who thrived on fear, who carried pistols not just on their belts, but in their hearts, ready to draw at the slightest provocation. Downstairs, the murmur of voices rose and fell as townsfolk debated what would come next. Some grateful for Sam's courage, others wishing he had never interfered, for they feared the chaos that would surely follow. Sam himself was at the edge of town, sitting by a dying fire with his horse tied nearby, his gaze fixed on the flames as though searching for answers in their dance. He had been through towns like this before, places where violence was a shadow that never left, and he knew that by striking Harlan down, he had chosen a side, whether he liked it or not. Clara found herself walking to him that night, unable to stay locked away, while fear gnawed at her insides. She approached quietly, the hem of her dress brushing against the dry earth, and when he looked up, his eyes softened, as though he had been expecting her. She thanked him then, though the words felt too small for what he had done, and he only shook his head, telling her in that steady voice that he hadn't done it for thanks. He had done it because it was right. They spoke little after that. But in the silence between them, something unspoken grew, something fragile yet undeniable, like a seed pressed into dry soil, waiting for the rain. The next day, before the sun had fully risen, riders came into town. 3 of Harlan's men, hardied and grinning cry, guns heavy on their hips. They asked for Sam by name, spitting in the dirt as they swore the cowboy would answer for what he had done. And though many townsfolk scattered, peeking from windows and doors, Sam stood firm in the street, his hat pulled low, Clara watching from the porch with her breath caught in her chest. The men laughed, circling him like wolves, But Sam's hand never shook as it hovered near his holster, his voice calm when he warned them to leave it be. They didn't listen. The draw was fast, faster than most could even see. And when the smoke cleared, two lay bleeding in the dust, while the third galloped off to carry word that the cowboy was no man to trifle with. Clara ran to him, her heart pounding, fear and relief tangling inside her, and as he reached to steady her trembling hands, he told her once more that she was safe. But now they both knew the road ahead would be darker still, because men like Harland did not forgive and did not forget. Yet, as they stood there together, the town watching in silence, something stronger than fear took root. Hope, the kind that could turn strangers into allies and give a woman back her voice, and the kind that might just make a cowboy stay long enough to change everything.